All right. Good morning, everybody. Glad you all could come. Happy to see y'all here. I am talking into the microphone. I know you guys can hear me. I know it's never been a problem for me, but this is so that the folks who are live streaming can hear what I'm saying. So if it gets a little loud, understand we're setting it up so that a couple of our assessors who couldn't make it today are able to pick up what we're doing. Thank you again for coming. I think this is my third Township Assessors meeting that we've had. So man, time flies. Time flies for sure. Glad you could all make it. I will let everybody on the stream know who is here. What I will do is Dan can point the camera from up there onto you guys. Just introduce yourself. And I understand Steve wants to make an introduction as well. So he's going to put the camera on you. Just push the little talkie button here in the lower right-hand corner. So that way the folks on the stream can hear. Just so we can let everybody know who's here. We'll start up here at the front.
Justin Milton. I'm a multi-township assessor here in McLean County.
Glenn Milton, Township Assessor for Randolph and a couple others.
Steve Scudder, City of Bloomington Township Assessor, and I have 3 new staff members I want to introduce. To my immediate left is Colton Canales, his left is Kyle Strong, and to his left is Ben Ireland.
Sean Harner, Deputy Assessor for McLean County Supervisor of Assessments.
Connie Clifford, Assistant Chief County Assessment Officer.
Jeff Martindale, Township Assessor. Kent Depew, Normal Township Assessor.
And then here in the back, we have Gene Yeast and Joe Stevens from the Board of Review. They don't have microphones, so they can't introduce themselves. But you guys know who they are. That's not a problem. So we'll go ahead and get started. We'll jump right in. We are required by statute to hold this meeting every year on or about January 1st. And the purpose of this meeting is for us at the county level to kind of inform you about the policies and procedures from our office level to your township level that is going to help the annual process work more smoothly. These are guidelines. We communicate with all of you directly. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If you need any clarification as we go on through the year, the material and the PowerPoint, we can talk about it, we can work through it. But the purpose of this meeting is to kind of keep you all in the loop of what we've got going on at the county level and what we're looking forward to in the coming year. Slide. So we'll start with our transitions page. Obviously, the saddest news we had this year was we lost our friend Rob Cranston, passed away early this winter. Our condolences go out to Normal Township, the staff, and his family. Kent Depew, the commercial appraiser up there, was seated. Was that in December? That you ended December? The 21st, he was appointed to fill the position. So we're happy to have him on board and stepping up into that role. In other bittersweet news, our friend Gina Metternach, longtime Board of Review member, for personal reasons, had to resign her seat from the Board of Review. Very sorry to see her go, but we understand. Life happens, things happen, and so we did lose her. We'll talk about that here a little bit more, what we're doing there. We talked about Kent, and then can announce, with his permission, didn't want to steal any thunder from him, Joe Stevens, our longest tenured Board of Review member, has decided that he will not be seeking reappointment when his term ends this year. So again, we have some transition going on at the Board of Review level. We'll talk about that here a little bit more in a second, but just kind of letting you all know what's happening there. Our staffing matrix hasn't changed since last year. We still have the loyal and dedicated Connie Clifford running the show, taking care of everything related to office administration and policy. She's our public information officer. She handles all the requests for data that we get for, Open Records Act, public information, everything like that, Connie is our liaison. She also does work with PTAB. She does the residential work. If it goes to PTAB, she handles that, and then the administration of our PTAB cases. And she also does the administration of non-homestead exemptions. So, all the public stuff that we're glad we don't have to deal with. Connie's the one who takes care of that. Then we have Sean Harner, our staff assessor. Is this your second year as staff assessor? Or second full year as staff assessor. She is our liaison to you folks. She's our first point of contact with you if you have a problem, if you have an issue. If we have something we want relayed out to you, Sean is that conduit. And she does absolutely fantastic job of that, as I'm sure you guys all know by now. She is the one who gets the books ready for you and then reviews them after you submit them for any errors or questions, corrections, things like that. She also handles all of my special valuation projects that we have to deal with. We'll talk about that here a little bit down the line. But if there's a problem that we feel like needs to be addressed from the county level for uniformity's sake or equity's sake, rather than having a patchwork of townships doing different things, she's been doing those. And again, fantastic job on that front. She does our splits and combinations as well for the counties for the townships that utilize us. And then she also, in addition to all that, she provides frontline help for the staff and the counter when the public comes in. So she does a little bit of everything in the office. We're incredibly blessed to have her. Josh Schuster is our GIS technician. He does all of our mapping, creating our map, maintaining our map, and then he does our farmland valuation as well, making sure the farmland values get uploaded and applied correctly. You guys all know Mary. She's our longest termed staffer, right? Been here for over, I think, 25 years now, handling all of our border review stuff, appeals, as well as helping out with sketching. When you bring your stuff in, she's one of the ones who helps get those into the system. Jill Belcher, another one of our long-term members, administrative specialist. She does transfer declarations for review and analysis. She does homestead exemption review and analysis as well. And then our newest staffer, newest as in just going on 2 years now. Yeah, going on 2 years now. But our most recent hire is Tracy Gibbons. She does taxpayer counter and telephone support and homestead exemptions as well. So yeah, that's our team. You ever feel free to pop in, say hi to all of them. Good folks. They like you all. They're 50-50 on me most of the time, but that's okay. Next slide, please. Border review. We have our chairman, Mr. Yeast. We have Mr. Stevens, who is our Democrat appointee. I point this out not to, I hate the political side of this, that we even have to talk about this, but by statute, the border review has to be comprised of 3 members, 2 of them from one political party, 1 of them from another. 2 of the members by law have to come from the party that got the highest number of votes in a county-wide election. So for the last several years, it's been either the sheriff or the treasurer's office who have gotten the highest number of votes. Those are Republican positions, so the border review has a Republican majority on it. Gene is the chairman. He's a Republican appointee. Joe's Democrat appointee. We currently have 1 vacancy. As I talked about Gina being gone, she was a Republican appointee. We are actively in the process of getting this seat filled and also preparing for the imminent departure of Joe. So over the next couple months, we are going to schedule, we already had 1 border review exam. Nobody from McLean County took it, unfortunately. I had a couple folks lined up who just at the end of the day, something didn't work out for them. So we are going to reschedule the exam at some point in the spring. Department of Revenue also is holding a border review course that qualifies an individual to serve on the board by virtue of completing it. If you know of anybody who would have the interest or wherewithal to want to serve on the Board of Review, please put them in contact with us so we can get them certified up so they can sit on the board. Even if we don't ultimately fill the board with one of them, having extra Board of Review members qualified is a good thing for the county, because if we do run into a situation where we get an excess number of appeals, we can have additional board members appointed who can serve as hearing officers. And if we do that, that can help take some of the workload off of our main board. And then we can, so we always have a need for Board of Review members is what I'm trying to say. So if anybody knows anybody who wants to get certified as a board member, let us know and we'll get them set up. All right, that says 2022 publication recap, should say 2023 publication recap. Our first books were submitted on February 22nd. The last books were submitted on October 5th. The map has changed from prior years. In prior years, my color coding was based on people who got their books turned in earlier than the prior year. We've done a substantially good job of that, so I'm not worried about whether or not your books come in, a week before what they did the prior year. That's not my concern anymore. Now my concern is making sure we're in before June 17th, which is the statutory date. The townships in purple all had their books turned in on or before June 17th. Wonderful. Happy as can be about that. The townships in blue had their books turned in within 7 days of their prior year submittal. And then the townships in red were after that. So again, just sort of a barometer of progress for where we are and where we're going. Next slide will be, you can see our publication map. I wish I did not have to do this. All those stars are different papers that I have to publish in by statute. I think there's 9 different papers I have to publish in. I wish I didn't have to do that. I wish I could publish in one paper. By law, if a paper is published in your township, I have to publish values in that township. So you can see we've got all those papers there and it's color coded so you can see which papers are what. Yeah, those are all the different papers that we have to publish in the county. I try to balance where we publish them with making sure that if we have a multi-township jurisdiction or we have a joint assessor, that I publish as many of those together as I can. Sometimes I have to make kind of, I have to make calls on it, what I think is going to be the best orientation. For the most part, it works out, but that's the method behind why I publish them together. They are either a multi-township jurisdiction, or they are one township assessor has 2 of the townships, and I like those to be together if we can have that happen. Makes it easier on the township, so they're publishing in as few places, have as few deadlines, everything like that. 2023, we continued our taxpayer information sessions. We reconfigured the schedule a little bit this year, changed a couple of the locations. We had our meeting again at Leroy. That's a fantastic location for us. It's at the Living Well United Center right there in, the northwest side of Leroy. Great little building. They roll out the red carpet for us. So we did go back there again last year. We will probably go back again this year because it's such a great venue. We did a meeting at the Lexington Community Center up in Lexington that had a nice turnout. And then in lieu of a couple other hearings or meetings in outlying areas, we decided to have one big event at the McLean County Fair this year, which was an absolutely wonderful experience. Had a lot of taxpayers come out, had a lot of taxpayers come into the office after the fair and say that they heard about an exemption or a deduction because they had talked to somebody at the fair that they didn't know about, and then they came in the next week and got it taken care of. So that's always nice to hear. What I do at those sessions is I go over how property taxes are assessed and calculated. People don't often understand why we do, how we do what we do, how it's kind of different from an appraisal, all sorts of stuff like that, kind of dispelling some myths and misconceptions that folks have. Again, generally very well received. Folks, once they understand the way the system works, they're a little bit more inclined to have faith in our numbers. We also go over exemptions and deductions they might be eligible for, and then how to file an appeal, because it's during the appeal window that we do that. We hold our sessions in conjunction with County Treasurer Rebecca McNeil and County Clerk Kathy Michael, both fantastic resources. Can't say enough about Treasurer McNeil. You know, she helped us get the fair process coordinated. We were out there, both staffs from our office and the treasurer's office sort of manned the booth at the fair during the 5-week run, or 5 week, it'd be a long time, during the 5-day county fair run. And so again, it was a very, very beneficial, worthwhile process. At the public information sessions, they often had the opportunity to meet assessors, their township assessor, you folks, and or county board members. Our county board chairman, Catherine Metzger, I have the utmost level of respect for her. She comes to every one. And even before she was the county board chairman, she's the finance chairman. She came to every one of our hearings, no matter where they were in the county. Her level of dedication and commitment to her role as a public servant and to her taxpayers is absolutely phenomenal. So she was at and has been at every one of our meetings. A couple other county board members were up in the Lexington meeting, and I think came to the Leroy meeting as well in prior years. Next slide. Little snippets of stuff from the information session. There's Jill holding down the fort at the county fair. You can see we had a bunch of cool displays up, different maps. Had a really cool map on wind towers. That was the draw of the fair. We had all of the wind towers in the county put up on a map showing where they were. So many people came and asked us about, what the wind towers were, and so we had a really good opportunity to explain that part of what we do. I can't remember the statistics now, but I think, the wind power generated in McLean County, if it were one power installation, McLean County in wind energy generates enough electricity to fully power the city of Dallas for a year, which I think is a very interesting fact. So those wind towers really do provide a lot of benefit to the electric grid. And then as taxpayers, those wind towers, if they were, again, owned by one entity and were one body, they'd be the second largest taxpayer in McLean County. If they were one wind, they'd be only smaller than State Farm in terms of their contribution to the tax base. So again, people were really interested in that graph, so I was happy to be able to do that. Next slide. 2023 Board of Review. We held our last hearing on the 29th of December. We were able to get our last one done. We processed 856 dockets in 2023. 663 of those were taxpayer generated. So what we would call appeals, taxpayer appeals, 663. This compares to prior years the prior year, 625 and 452. Those numbers are very, very, very similar to the number in the year before that, very similar. So you can see we had somewhat of an increase this year. Again, like we expected. We put some pretty big factors on a lot of townships. They got some pretty big numbers. And so, we had when you do that, you're going to expect some additional complaints from taxpayers on it. Our value loss for 2023 up to the date of the making of this PowerPoint was $38.9 million in EAV loss at the board level. It's probably going to go up slightly because we had one or two more appeals get put in there, but not much. I think we'll probably hit close to $40 million by the time it's done. Still within 1% of our total EAV, which is a fairly decent benchmark to hold. I always tell when I teach class for baby assessors, I always say, your appeal, as long as if your appeals are below 2% of your EAV, that's a healthy number to have. 2% is kind of that threshold. If you start getting 5, 10% of your EAV under appeal, then you've got some issues. If you don't have anything under appeal, if you've got like 0.2% under appeal, that's a completely different kind of problem. That means that, maybe you need to go out there and look at this stuff and kind of catch up with the market. So we're right in the sweet spot, I think, of where we want to be on those complaints. Again, our number is higher this year in board loss, but again, a lot of that goes to, we put some really big factors on. We really bumped up the EAV this year. So I'm not surprised by that number by any means. It's just something that, we have to deal with. That's part of the process. Next slide. You can see our exemptions. Those numbers don't change all that much from year to year. You can see the one big change we have, and the numbers, the 2023 numbers, those are live numbers. Those will change because we're constantly adding, getting new stuff put on. That's a snapshot in time. But you can see we're roughly similar. The biggest difference we had this year in exemptions was the state created a new category of exemption related to the disabled veterans. So if you are a 100% permanent and total disabled veteran, they created a new category to account for those because there's a lot of Department of Revenue has some bookkeeping and stuff they got to keep track of. They changed the law to make it so that those applications don't have to be reapplied for every year. So in order to track it, they created a new category. That shifted some of the numbers from a couple of the other disabled veteran buckets over into that new one. So those are some of the bigger changes you see there. But for the most part, those numbers stay pretty constant year over year. Senior freeze, nothing new here. It is our most labor-intensive exemption because it requires us every year, people to qualify for it. They have to submit their income. We have to verify that their income is eligible for it. A couple years ago, they did change it so that you can use other proof to indicate that you would qualify for this by statute. You can see that in the third bullet point down. We will mail the applications out towards the end of this month for people to reapply for their senior freeze. Right now, the income limit is still $65,000 a year. People don't like to hear that because, a lot of that stuff's going up. And so some people are falling off. We do not control that number. 65,000 is statutory. Whether or not the General Assembly changes it, that's an open question. I would venture a guess, just based on what I hear, the folks I talk to, that we are probably reaching an inflection point where in the next couple cycles that number will change. Don't know when, but if I were a betting man, I would say that, yeah, it's going to happen. It's just going to be a matter of time. But for right now, that number is still 65,000. You can see at a glance for 2023 where we stood numbers-wise in terms of EAV. We added $600 million in EAV between 2022 and 2023. $600 million. Now, we had a couple big projects go on. We had Rivian that went on. The expansion of that plant went on for 2023. That added a substantial amount of EAV. We had a new wind farm go online down in the southeast part of the county. West, Bellflower, that area. That added a good amount of EAV. But we also had, 9 and 10% factors across the board. So our total EAV growth was 12.4% year over year. Again, just factual. That's what it is, and those are the reasons why it went up. But you can see in the percent change column, you can, at a glance, you can see you can see that Dry Grove Township, 100% increase. That's Rivian. West Township, 107% increase. Wind Tower. Bellflower Township, 57% increase. Wind Tower. Next. So that says tax year 2024. It's really more 2023 moving into 2024, the equalization process. We continued our recent pace of growth on equalization factors. The median factor in 2023 was 1.091. Prior quads, those factor medians were 1, 1, 1.017, and then last year 1.05. So you can see that factor has gone up year over year. Sales prices stabilized in 2023 after, we had that huge rapid increase in sale prices in 2021, 2022. 2023, we started to see that stabilize. Interest rates reached a point where it slowed the growth in home values. But those ratios stayed pretty high for stuff that did sell due to both national factors, just the national market still fairly robust, and hyper-local factors within McLean County. We already had a depressed amount of new construction, and a lot of this is being driven to the residential market. We had a reduced amount of new construction activity for about a decade. I remember when I first started with City, this was in 2013, at one point we had pretty much had all hands on deck going out getting new construction for residential put on. And then by 2015, 2016, we put on a handful of new residential properties after that. So we had about a decade where there was not a lot of residential new construction going on. That, combined with the sales increase in 2021, 2022, combined with our factors here in the market with folks from Rivian moving into the area and that increasing demand, that has caused our market to have a very, very, very stable and robust set of ratios. Without knowing for sure, this is just my projection, take it for what you will. I think equalization factors are probably going to remain next year similar to what they were this year, based on what I've seen on sales ratios, the work that's been done, and how they calculate it. Again, all of this is out of our hands. It's based on the sales, and we're still have the 3-year look back, and the market, those ratios are still, like I said, stubbornly high. But keep in mind, it could be a lot worse than what we're looking at here. As an example, I put up the Casa del Jorzac here. We negotiated the price on our house in 2020 when we purchased it, $161,500, third quarter of 2020. Now, we got a very good deal on our house because we were already living there. The owner of the house wanted to sell, and so it made everybody's benefit. We got a good price on the house. The normal township assessor had the fair cash value of our house at $193,000. I think that was pretty fair. Never appealed it, I knew we got a good deal on it, so I wasn't too worried about it. In 2020, fair cash value of $193,000. I think that's a good number. If I retroactively look at what that value would be, Normal Township now has my home worth $228,900 based on, and Normal has had very representative factors for that everybody else has had. They had 5% last year, 10% this year. Very representative of what we had. My home's value would be 228.9, or it is this year. If we were looking at the Case-Shiller Price Index, which is a national monitor of home values, my home's value is 272.6. If you look my home up on Zillow right now, the value is 275.2. So we are still well below where other places, other indicators of value might have us. Again, this is one example. One example is not a data. An anecdote is not a substitute for data. But this illustrates that point. You know, following market trends, this is where we are versus where we would be if we were just looking at really, really hyper time specific sales data. So again, that is a benefit of the system here in Illinois. We are building up slowly. Probably gonna have a little bit of a longer tail as the market comes down, but we also didn't spike it up to potentially where it could be. So that's a good thing. Next. All right, any questions so far before we move into 2024 nuts and bolts? All right. First stop, countywide valuations. I talked about why we do this. We have some projects that it's in our best interest to have a uniform countywide value on those so that we don't have a patchwork of different values at different points. Sean has done that very ably over these last two cycles. This year, she did 31 mobile home parks in the county, just the land, not the improvements on them, but she revalued the mobile home park land, and she did all 24 commercial grain elevators in the county. We put some not insignificant increases on those grain elevators. They were kind of all over the place. They hadn't been looked at in a while. She did very diligent work in getting that done. Put some, like I said, not insignificant factors on those. Had 0 taxpayer complaints. Formal taxpayer complaints. I mean, we had taxpayer complaints about it. But at the end of the day, we had 0 complaints filed on those. It's a huge thing. 0 with an asterisk complaints on urban mobile home parks. We had one park that we're not entirely sure, kind of straddles the line of whether or not we think it should still be considered a mobile home park, but by the rules of everything, it's a mobile home park. They did file an appeal, but it's a little bit of a square peg, so we're not gonna worry about that one. Everybody else, we had 0 complaints on them. We had 8 complaints on non-urban mobile home parks. But Sean did a great job in coordinating with just about all of those parks when they filed their complaint to get, okay, then what is your income information? Kind of give us an idea of what we're looking at here. What's the composition of your park? Do you have excess land that we need to consider? Stuff like that. And most of them were taken care of in a fairly, oh gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? In a fairly equitable process, yes, mutually agreeable process. Everybody was kind of on the same page. So again, can't say enough for how well she did on getting that done. This year, she's gonna be turning her attention to communications towers. Again, this is another area where we're kind of all over the place in the county, how we're valuing these things by I can't think of the name of the statute, but the like kind rule. Communications towers are taxable in McLean County. So we are going to make sure that we are all equitable with communication towers. So just be on the lookout for that. As we work through the year, she is going to be working on that. Next. Affordable housing programs. This is something else that we have to handle here. A new law effective for the 2023 tax year required that affordable housing projects be valued based on their income. Previous to that change in the statute, we were just required to consider income as part of our valuation. Well, we apparently weren't doing a good enough job considering it because the legislature said, no, you have to do it. So this year, all of the affordable housing projects that we knew about and that supplied us income received a value based on their income. Those are Section 42s, which are your traditional multifamily projects. Your Section 8s, which are voucher projects, where instead of, you just get the tenant gets a taxpayer-funded voucher that they can take to any landlord. That's Section 8. And then Section 515, which is the rural counterpart to Section 42. Sean does these for everybody outside of the urban townships. So if you're not one of the urban townships, we already do this for you. They send us the information if they know about it. We do the valuation. It is your decision whether or not you want to do these. We can give you the factors that we use, the cap rates, everything like that, but it's your decision. If you want us to help you, we're happy to do it. Happy to do it. Just coordinate with Sean if you need help. If you're in an outlying township that has a project that comes in and they're like, well, you want to fund an income, coordinate with her and we can get you taken care of there. Next. Talk a little bit about sales chasing. This is an important topic because there's a lot of confusion out there. I will be the first to admit that I did not understand a lot of this as I was coming through here in Illinois because there are very specific criteria in Illinois for what we have to do. Sales chasing is governed in Illinois by the court decision Walsh versus the Property Tax Appeal Board, 1998. You can see the code citation there. Actually happened just next door in Tazewell County was the impetus for this particular case. But now Walsh is governing law in the state of Illinois. What happened in Walsh was the Board of Review in Tazewell County found 85 properties in the county, essentially changed their value to the sale price. One of those property owners, Walsh, sued, said you can't do that, that's not equitable. Supreme Court agreed and said, no, you cannot do this. When you value a property that sells and don't value similarly properties that didn't sell, that is impermissible sales chasing because it violates the constitutional provision in Illinois that taxes be determined uniformly by value. So it violates the uniformity clause. All of this is to say that when you are doing your values, have an eye on what sales chasing is and where that line is. Sometimes stuff sells, and there's a very good reason why your value is wrong. You could have a condition that's wrong. You'd be like, oh, wow, this is in a lot better shape than we thought it was. That's not sale chasing. That's correcting the record and revaluing. That's okay. Really tangible nuts and bolts issues. This building's 20% bigger than we thought it was. Okay, that's not sale chasing. We can make that. The grade, objectively determined. Like, man, we had this wrong. This really is a B plus 10 rather than a B. That is okay. The problem is when you do it just for the sake of getting to the matching the sale price. You can't do that. From the township level, you need to be your primary concern as taxpayers, or as assessors, is applying the value uniformly. Don't worry necessarily about the sale price. You should be more focused on mass appraisal factors, section, class, neighborhood, different styles, construction types. You guys know all this. I don't have to go too much in depth, but those are the factors you should be looking at. And let the assessed value fall where it may. Don't cherry pick properties to value. That's not a good, and honestly, this is a gray area. There are lines. There could be maybe we did have this grade wrong a little bit, but it should be pretty egregious if you're going to go in and revalue based on something like that. Obviously, don't consider all that stuff in the third bullet point. Those aren't value factors that we need to worry about. Don't cherry pick properties. And just again, always go back to equity. Now, having said all that, on appeal, it is a very different story. At the appeal process, we no longer care about equity. Equity does not matter from our perspective if the equity is higher. Again, I did the same thing when I was defending appeal. Sometimes I would make an equity argument. You have to understand that to PTAB, an equity argument from the township level is not persuasive. They are concerned about making sure the value is correct to fair cash value. They will accept an equity argument from taxpayers, yes, because that's the law. But from you, your values should be focused on appeal at fair cash value. I am trying my best here to stress that moving forward. Equity arguments by themselves carry this much weight. If you can't see the camera, I'm holding up a big old goose egg. Equity arguments do not carry weight because all PTAB cares about is fair cash value. It doesn't matter if this house is in line with everybody else. If they sold for $150,000 and you've got them at $180,000, PTAB does not care that every other house is at $180,000. Just letting you guys know that. Again, so we can have clear lines of communication there. I'm saying it in black and white. Because again, and this goes back years. This is a very hazy issue. There's no fault here. I'm not saying anybody has done anything wrong. I just don't think that the understanding is there for how truly important that consideration is. They don't care about equity. Fair enough?
Well, it works on the other side too. If they pay $200,000, we got $150,000. They don't care if everybody else at $150,000. They just looking at the $200,000.
Microphone.
PTAB will raise values if our evidence supports raising that value. PTAB will not hesitate to raise a value.
Right. If they file a complaint and we establish that this value is that, hey, you know what, they were underassessed, PTAB has and will raise that value as necessary if the sale backs it up. Like, it's not common because most folks don't force that issue because there's, they gotta understand, hey, I'm gonna keep my head down and move forward here. But PTAB will do that. If you can document that the cash value of this property is what it is, then they will do it. I've put a couple at the PTAB level when I do commercial properties. I have put a couple on at increases just to highlight that point. I mean, at the end of the day, am I gonna force the issue at the final decision? Who knows? But sometimes I think taxpayers need to understand that your value is fair and we're doing what we can on it. And we're not afraid to, do the things we need to do as well. And that's legitimate and that's fair, Good assessed values and fair assessed values are important for everybody. So I'm not gonna apologize for that. Next, new construction. Sean has asked me to let you all know, if you are submitting blueprints instead of a hand-drawn sketch, please confirm and indicate that that property was built according to the plan. There are many cases where the final building does not match up with what was initially submitted. Don't know the reasons why. I'm not a construction engineer. Ain't gonna pretend to be. But I do know that sometimes something happens and the building is different than what the blueprint has. So if we are doing the sketching for you, if you're doing sketching yourself, that's on you. But if we're doing it, if we're going to do the sketching for you, you need to let us know that everything lines up with what we have so we can make sure our record's correct on it. Also, an incomplete blueprint does not equate to a sketch. Like I said, we dedicate a lot of time to putting these sketches in the system. Please help us out as much as you can to verify that the property is as it shows. New construction on farms. We need a map or an illustration or some kind of image, maybe an overhead photo or something that shows the location of home sites and other buildings on there so we can allocate out the appropriate land value classifications. Just point of emphasis, make sure that if you have new construction out there, that we know what's going on that site so we can value it correctly. We can allocate farmland, what needs to be allocated to farmland, everything else allocated that it needs to be allocated to. Next. Certificates of error. This came up a couple of times this year. So we need to talk about what a certificate of error is, what the statute says, and how we're going to handle these moving forward. How we've traditionally handled them, and how we're going to handle them moving forward, I should say. Excuse me. A certificate of error is an instrument that corrects an error in fact, not an error in judgment. An error in fact. The state property tax code prohibits certificates of error that might be based on errors in judgment as to the valuation. Very clearly says you cannot do a certificate of error on an error of judgment. Next. Taxpayers do not have any type of authority or right to participate in the certificate of error procedure. The certificate of error procedure is entirely a creature of the county assessment office. Okay? As you can see, the Supreme Court has held that the General Assembly intended the process to be an expeditious summary process without participation for correcting assessors' errors. We have always held that pretty literally and strictly, and we're going to continue to hold that literally and strictly as to an error in fact. So when we talk about this, what is a fact in this context? It's something that is objective. There's no argument about it. This building you say is here, and this building is not here. That is an objective fact. It has to be measurable. So, grade, condition, things like that are not necessarily measurable. Finally, it needs to be provable. You have to be able to indicate to us of what this error in fact was. Next. Those are the standards we are going to look at. So if you request a certificate of error from us, please let us know the nature of the error in fact. So for example, incorrect square footage. You said this house was 2,000 square feet with a 500 square foot finished basement. But there is no finished basement. And it's very clear that there's not a finished basement. Okay, that is the nature of the error in fact. Then give us a methodology for calculating what that error in fact is. So, if the basement example, give us a valuation ladder that shows the value of the property with the finished basement and the value of the property without the finished basement, so we can apply that error. Provide a breakdown of the values between land improvement and total before and after, so that we can correctly enter it into our system. And have either yourself or the deputy who is handling it sign off on why that change is. Any error you find must be sufficient for the board to determine what the correction is and that the correction is warranted. So document everything that you can document. Photographs, sketches, calculations, certificates, affidavits filed by the homeowner, whatever, documenting that error. If you do not meet these criteria, we will reject the certificate and you can fix it for the next year. Okay? That's the line we want to hold here. We all know mistakes happen. You know, I remember one year we did a evaluation on a commercial property, and we miskeyed one of the values into our form, accidentally added a 0 onto the value, and it was one of those situations where it wasn't quite enough to where it was going to stand out on a process check, because it was still a relatively, I don't want to say realistic, but it could be that number. It wasn't outside any realm of possibility, but it was substantial. With that added 0, it ended up being substantially higher than what we intended for it to be. Taxpayer actually paid on it for like 2 years before they finally said, hey, we don't think this is right. We ended up doing it and fixing it for as far back as we could, because we acknowledged, yes, this was a factual error. A mistake was made here. We corrected it. So we get that stuff like that happens. Buildings, change, stuff happens, there are reasons for it. But for the most part, everything can be handled in the subsequent assessment year, unless it is something that is very tangible and very provable and very measurable. Okay, next. Connie wanted me to bring this to your attention for this year. We can give you direct access to MyDeck. MyDeck is the state's transfer declaration application. We can give you direct login access to view and print those transfer declarations, so you can see as they come in. You can run reports and identify properties and then view the declaration itself. What's cool about it, you can already see here on this example, it spells out the address of the property, the recording date, the consideration, the EAV, the deed type, and it has right there on the display screen sales ratios. So you can see exactly what we're looking at and those numbers that the state's seeing. So again, very, very helpful to have in your back pocket. Talk to Connie about it if you want to get set up for access. Moving forward, farmland process not going to be any different than it is in the prior years. I put those pictures in there for you guys. What are you showing the diversity of the McLean County agricultural sector? We don't grow a lot of wine grapes or asparagus in McLean County. Would that it be so? And I don't think we have any alpaca farms either. There's one? Okay, so we do got one. We got one. And there is asparagus growing around. You got to know where to find it, but it's there. And there are, fence row grapes too. So there you go. There you have it. Farmland values. Nothing different this year. We will have the 2024 values loaded into the system within the next 2 weeks. Just kind of waiting on getting the 2023 year closed. When we have that done, we'll upload the 2022 farmland values, 2024 farmland values. 2025 values, we are expecting here in the next few months. Department of Agriculture, Department of Revenue will get those out to us. Usually in March or April is when we get those. Not expecting any surprises there. The actual full value probably will be lower, but we are still working on the stair step. So they're going to go up 10%. I can pretty much guarantee you that. Then later on in the spring, after we get those values, I will convene the FARC, Farmland Assessment Review Committee, and they have the chance to review the values, and then they need to approve them and send them downstate. If they don't approve them, they have to provide an alternate value rubric. So, get working. After they have approved them, then they'll be sent out with public notice, and it will be all set. Next. 2024 Board of Review. 2023 saw a lot of overhauls in how we conduct business. We started bringing folks in person again. Hadn't happened since the pandemic. We started having more folks come in on person. We moved to Microsoft Teams as our universal platform for sharing information. There were some hiccups with that, as is going to happen anytime you roll out something new. But very practically speaking, the process moved very smoothly. We are going to continue that moving forward with an eye toward making it even more streamlined and easy to use as possible. You got to understand, sending files out and around as email attachments causes any number of problems with files falling off, files dropping off, left hand not knowing what the right hand's doing, all sorts of issues that Teams has been able to help us address. So we are going to continue with that. We are also looking at the potential of 2 new faces on the Board of Review this year. So we need to make this as easy as possible for them and streamlined as possible, and take this opportunity to make some changes that we think is going to be beneficial to the overall process. The first thing, we're going to change how we handle hearings for remote hearings. In prior years, we've always had issues, especially when it comes to 100K appeals, having a number of participants on the line. We can only accommodate so many folks on the telephone in the Board of Review room. So we end up having to do all sorts of crazy stuff to get, we have people calling in on cell phones, holding cell phones up to the speaker pod. That doesn't work out for anybody. Teams gives us the capability to work a lot like Zoom, where we can send out invitations. Folks can they can do a camera stream, or Teams gives you the option of sending out a telephone number, and then you can just call in like you would call in onto the pod, only you're calling into Teams, and then everybody's participating on the Teams screen. We have a couple practical issues to work out in terms of getting the room equipped so that we have microphones so that, the other folks can hear, but nothing insurmountable to the extent that we think it's not going to be possible for the next board cycle. Again, I would stress, come in person if at all possible, because that makes it easier for if everybody's in the same room, then we don't have to worry about any of this. It's when people, and sometimes it happens. Taxpayers can't make the hearing. We get that, so we keep that option open. But if at all possible, we want everybody to be in the room if they can be. The other thing we've got to work on is rule clarifications on evidence submittal. Both sides of the process, the appellant, some on the township side, we need to be consistent in how we apply things. We are getting attorneys starting to bring up in PTAB filings that we are not following the rules as they are laid out in our Board of Review rules. That is not a good look for us. Then we have to spend time in the PTAB hearing explaining why we aren't following our own rules. So we are going to clarify when information has to be submitted for the Board of Review so we can make sure that everybody gets their evidence, again, on both sides, making sure that if they don't submit evidence, they don't request a hearing, the board's not going to consider their appeal. That's had that happen this year. It will happen more next year. We are going to be very strict in following our board's rules. You guys all know Mary. She's going to continue working as our staff liaison, at least for the foreseeable future. She keeps threatening that she's going to up and leave. And so, barring that happening, Mary will still be here doing our work as the staff liaison for the Board of Review. And again, if you have ideas on how we can make this process work more smoothly for you, we're happy to hear them. We're not, you guys, most of you know me now, have known me for years now. I'm not a, it has to be done this way. I will work with you on what we need to get done, but we do need to make some kind of sense. That gets us to the last part, which is going to be the calendar and deadlines for next year. This is my third cycle as Chief County Assessment Officer. We have our feet underneath us. We know what's going on. I think we're ready to take the next step here. This is my goal for the coming cycle. Expect books. If you receive the books from us, expect those by the beginning of February, potentially sooner. Sean will let you know when your books are ready. She's not going to dump them all out of you at once. She generally sends them out, like this batch of books is ready. Should all be out by February 1st, by the beginning of February. June 17th is the statutory deadline for submission of the books. Technically, it's the 15th. The 15th falls on a Saturday, so defaults to the next Monday. So June 17th is the deadline for submission of books. 26 townships met that threshold last year. I think we can do even better than that this year. The sooner the books get turned in, the sooner that we can publish. The sooner that we can publish, the sooner the board review can start. The sooner the board review starts, the sooner the board of review can finish. Okay? My goal this year, again, this is a goal. Goals are aspirational. My goal this year is to condense our publication calendar down to a handful of dates, ideally in mid-August, with all townships published by the end of August. You can kind of see that 4-date block I have circled up there. Next. If we can meet this goal, the filing deadline will be 30 days later in that block in September. So just after Labor Day, we should have the filing deadline done. That will give us 2.5 months for hearings. And we can complete by Thanksgiving and leave us the entire month of December for stuff that might pop up. Give us plenty of buffer room. So that next year, when I have this meeting, I can have this meeting like most counties do, which they have it in December. We can maybe have it scheduled for early part of December next year. That is our goal. I am going to be leaning on you guys to help me get this done. Again, it's not an issue in 26 townships have, you guys have traditionally gotten the stuff in by the deadline. Don't have much to worry about. Everybody else, work with you to really hammer that point home that we are trying to get this done in this window. Next slide. And there you go. That's my part of the presentation. Here's our contact info for the various staffers. It's in the back of your packet there. So take it, call us, bother us as necessary, and we're happy to help you out. Does anybody have any questions on what we just talked about? Statutory, legal, procedural, observational. Are we going to get 9 inches of snow next week, like my computer's telling me? The computer said it, Connie, not me. Nobody? All right, well, thank you all very much for coming. Hey, you know what? Love working with you guys. This is a great group of folks to work with. I know I deal with a lot of other counties in various other capacities. And we're really lucky to have the relationships we have here in McLean County with our ability to get along among the offices, between the offices. I think it's really a great thing. So let's keep that up moving forward. All right. Feel free to stick around. We can talk offline on some stuff. So thank you for attending the hearing today.